Hello, welcome back. My name is Sarah. In today's video, we're going to be discussing the tools of a coder. When a coder is working on a project, the sort of things they use, because often it's a multi-tab, multi-program, multi-file process. And not only those tools, but what sort of habits that we use to keep things organized and keep ourselves the most effective as possible. Multitasking is something we all do, coding and non-coding, so hopefully these tips will come in handy for you in all of your life. But first, a little bit of a quarantine update for me. Something I've been doing lately is remote theater. Theater is something that I also do in addition to coding, and we've been exploring how to do that when we can't leave our homes and be in the same space together. So did some Zoom, the conferencing app Zoom theater last night for an audience that showed up and acting with people in separate spaces, and it's really cool to create new types of an artistic medium in this time where we can't do it in the traditional way. I hope you're engaging in some new ways of doing activities, whether that's just socializing with your friends and your family, or a new creative habit, or exercise. This is a time for us to sort of explore what we've been doing and try it in a different way. So that's been kind of fun. So in Steven's video for today, what I was sort of drawing inspiration from my coworker Steven, he shows a little bit of his process sped up. I'll actually show that in a video right here. One thing we can see that's going on here, it's hard to follow, and that's actually one of Steven's points in this video. It's very tricky to see what's going on. It's moving fast. You see him flipping between files. You see him on YouTube. You see him in a paint project, but it's impossible for us to really tell. All we can tell is that it's across multiple programs. He's using different techniques, and that's sort of what we're going to discuss today, all the different techniques and tools that it takes to code something effectively. Traditionally, when we're learning how to code, we learn how to code in one file, with one program, with all the information being told to us, dictated to us, told exactly where to find it. But that's so far from the reality of coding, it's almost like learning how to paint if someone's holding your hand and moving the paintbrush for you. So much of coding is finding resources and manipulating different files and understanding relationships. Then not including that in your educational process as you're learning to be a coder is just only learning half of coding. So let's start and dive into this today and learn about a couple of the different tools that we have. The first tool that may seem kind of obvious is where we do our coding, but it is an important choice. Oftentimes we dictate this to you when we're teaching you. Here, use this program, use this program. That's a great place to start, but it's important to think about where you code has a lot to depend on your language and how you like to work. So there are a lot of these programs called IDEs, or Integrated Development Environments. They're sort of meta programs where you're able to code. They're applications that provide you with things like debuggers that help you out, that provide you ways to run your code, see your code, as well as just simple code editors. What this can look like depends on your language. Dr. Java here is a simple IDE for working with Java. But you can also have, here's Eclipse, which is a little bit more advanced, which can be used for Java, but also for JavaScript, Python, a lot of different languages. A lot of these are customizable, so you can create sort of an environment that works for you as a coder. Atom is another text editor, another IDE that can work for anything from C++ to Java, JavaScript, also Python, Ruby on Rails, HTML, a lot of different options there. So this is where we can actually write our code. Here we can see in Steven's video him using a program, an IDE, and a text editor program called Vim. My personal, since I code a lot in a language called Racket, I use something called Dr. Racket, sounds familiar like Dr. Java, that works for the Racket language. It allows me to write code, it has an interactions window, so allows me to sort of like mess with that code. I can run it, I can debug it, gives me a lot of those tools. In addition to the IDE, which is where we code, we also need to have resources where we check out how we're going to code, what we're going to code, what we need, what kind of tools we have. Languages have things called documentations, the docs. These are the docs for Racket. Here are the docs for a CSS framework called Bootstrap. Yesterday I was working with Bootstrap and I was working with cards. So if I wanted to see, hey, I want to see if cards, which is a different kind of component, have some tools. I want to see what kind of tools I can use with that, what sort of options I have here. Typical docs have the code, they have explanations of that code, they have demonstrations of that code that are resources for us as coders. Here in the Racket documentation, I can search. This one's a little bit more robust, it's a bigger language here, but I can search for a function, find it here, click onto it, and it brings me into this sublanguage of Racket called 2H, this library. Brings me to this library within Racket 2HTTP/image. And I can see this is the documentation for the function above. It shows me the name, the inputs, and what it outputs here. It tells me what those inputs are expected to be, which are images. It tells me what it does, and really good, my favorite thing in documentation is when there's an example, because when sometimes I can't get through, not quite understand what it's saying here, I can always copy and paste some examples and start tweaking, messing with it, and that's a good way for me, anyway, to start understanding something is by seeing it being used practically. So we have our documentation, which is where we look for if we know what we're looking for, but sometimes we have a problem and we don't even know what we're looking for. That's when just our good friend Google comes in handy. So Google offers us a lot of different options here. So something I was coming up with the other day is when I was working with Bootstrap is I wanted to know how do I change Bootstrap default colors? But it's not just enough to know how to Google it, it's good to know what sort of resources we're looking for. Stack Overflow is a great website. It is sort of a coder Q&A forum where coders will ask a question and then other coders can answer that. What's great about Stack Overflow and what's great about the internet in general is that you are working amongst a community of other coders and programmers. If you've come across a problem, it's likely somebody else has too. Why reinvent the wheel and struggle through that problem yourself when you can absorb the knowledge of this community you have around you? So find somebody else asking that question and then find somebody else answering that question. You can learn from that. So we've discussed three types of tools. So we have our IDE, where we code, we have our documentation, like our dictionary, and then we just have good old-fashioned Google, which can help us out, like our reverse dictionary, helping us find the tools that we need. Then we can then look up more documentation on and look into that, and then add to our code. When we're actually coding, it's likely that we're working in multiple files. We've got the documentation up, maybe a couple tabs of that. Maybe we have a couple tabs open with our Google questions. So it's important that we kind of try to keep this organized. Everyone comes up with their own styles, just like everyone has ways of keeping their desk organized. What looks like chaos to somebody else may be perfectly organized chaos to that person who owns that desk. When I'm working, I have two tactics. One is I like to see all of my windows. So I sort of overlap them in such a way I will choose when I have tabs and when I open a new sort of window. Sometimes I'll put all of my documentation tabs in one browser window and all my Google questions in another window. I can also have tabs in my IDE or windows, multiple windows of my IDE, and then I can sort of click in between them because I can always see them and I can always get to where I want to go. And this is something that to an outsider just looks like a mess, but to me, I know where my programs lie. I have my terminal window open also in the background so that I can access my terminal when I need to and open up a new file. That's my strategy. Additionally, when I I always ask, and this is something I advise you to do as well, always ask, do I still need this? Do I still need this window open? No, I'm actually done with Dr. Java, I'm done with Eclipse, I'm done with Atom, but I do need these windows open. I need this file open. Do I need this file open? So I'm keeping things as tidy as possible. I'm not leaving extra things hanging around to distract me and get me off of my task. So those are just some of the tools. I encourage you as you're learning how to code to start exploring some of these tools and really nailing down. Try documentation. Try to do some Google searches. Figure out what IDEs, what text editors you like to work in. It's all about knowing what works for you, about figuring out how you work best. Your computer is an extension of yourself. It's your extended mind. You want it to be a way where you can move quickly through from one idea to another. You don't want to get stuck because you can't find that file. You don't remember. You closed it. It's hidden somewhere underneath your other docs. So just start practicing that now. It'll come in handy later. I can promise you it's not something that goes away if you're ever going to start coding. Coding in one file is just something that just doesn't happen that often as a coder. So you need to get ready to manipulate that. All right, so that's our video for today. Thank you for joining me, and hopefully we'll see you next time. Until then, stay safe.